Sanabria here for this edition of Percussion Discussion. I guess you know what this instrument is. The Timbales. And now you've probably seen Maestro Tito Puente, the king of the Timbales, play this instrument. Actually, Maestro Puente revolutionized the way this instrument is played. But let me give you a little bit of the history, the basics of the instrument, how to play it, especially in this context, what we call the danzón, the first style that you must learn to be able to be a proficient timbalero if you're a guy, or timbalera if you're a girl. First of all, let's talk about the instrument itself. Well, what was it invented for? It was invented for a style of Cuban music known as danzón, meaning grand or great dance. And that style of music was developed by a great Cuban musician by the name of Miguel Failde, who came from Matanzas, Cuba, the city across the bay from La Habana. Miguel was what we call a mulatto. He was part of African heritage and part of European heritage. And he studied many different instruments. He was proficient on brass instruments, also on the piano and on the violin. So what he did was, in 1877, he fused the French contradance, this European dance tradition that actually were country dances by the farmers that were adapted by the bourgeoisie in France, Germany, Poland, and Czechoslovakia, other places, the high courts, and they adapted it to their own means. That music was brought to Haiti during the colonial period. It got to Cuba, it got to Puerto Rico, it got to New Orleans, Louisiana. And in Cuba, it inspired Miguel Failde to create what he called the grand dance, or danzón. Now, the first band that he formed in 1879 to play his first danzón, which he composed, Las Alturas de Simpson, in 1877. Wow, it took him 2 years to form a band to finally perform his first piece. It was made up of brass instruments, clarinet, some strings, concert tuba known as a bombardino or euphonium, piano, bass, and believe it or not, European style kettle drums, the timpani, yeah, and it was a big hit. The press lauded this as the new national music of Cuba. And you're probably wondering, well, why that? Because obviously the song tradition existed, but people knew that in Eastern Cuba, the song, the root of what we call salsa, that tradition didn't come until the late 19th century to La Habana. And that tradition, the song, and all the subgenres in it, like the guajira, the guaracha, etc., well, they were all done in an impromptu, improvisational kind of way. Nobody really wrote them down. They were folk song traditions. But now with the danzón, since Miguel Failde was classically trained, he wrote everything down, very meticulous in the arranging, etc., etc. It became a big hit, and he got to travel for the next 20 years, from 1879 onward, to Veracruz, Mexico. He was invited to perform there, and there the music took hold in its original form, in what the style of band that became known as a danzonera, these large ensembles that would play outdoors in the town square. Believe it or not, that music, the danzón, as it was played by these danzoneras, is still played that way in Veracruz, Mexico. It's like taking a time machine back into the 19th century. Failde, as I said before, went there, concertized there for the next 20 years. And you can go to Veracruz and you can hear actual danzoneras at a place called Salón Mexico that actually play the danzón in that original style. It's a beautiful dance, it's a box step, etc., etc. And there are many elements to it. Then finally, in 1899, a pianist by the name of Antonio Maria Romeo decides to bring the danzón, adapt it and scale it down in terms of instrumentation into a small group that he called a charanga francesa, or a charanga, C-H-A-R-A-N-G-A. And to do that, he eliminates the brass. He replaces that with a wooden Baroque flute known as a tercerola. It's a 5-key French-style flute from the Baroque period, very high piercing, etc. Uses violins, uses the acoustic bass, as I said before, and he uses the piano, but he replaces the timpani, the European timpani, with what became known as the timbales, which is the French word for the kettle drums or the timpanis. So you got to be careful when you go to Europe, and if you see a symphony orchestra and you look at the score and it says timbales, a French composer wrote it, they're not talking about the Cuban timbales, they're talking about the European kettle drums. But that inspired the use of this, the timbales. Now, before the timbales came a smaller set based on the European kettle drums, the European timpani, known as timbal criollo. It's like a smaller version of the European timpani. But what's interesting about it is they were played in an Africanized way, like I was doing before. And you do on the instrument, whether you're playing the timbal criollo, the timpani, or the timbales in the Cuban form, what we call baqueteo, B-A-Q-U-E-T-E-O. Now, this is highly arranged music. Another instrument that's used in the danzón, whether it's played by a danzonera or the charanga, is this, the guiro. Now, how did this danzón, the way they played it back in the 19th century, sound in the context of a danzonera orchestra, which is a combination of strings and brass, also saxophones, clarinet, etc. And the use of the way they used to play the European timpani, but not with a mallet like this, but with sticks like this, with no beads or heads on them, okay? And even fatter. Well, you're in for a treat. Let's look at the great Acerina, another transplanted Cuban who moved to Mexico and formed his own danzonera orchestra, Acerina y su danzonera. And let's watch him play with his orchestra in the early style of the way the danzón was played. Now, pay attention to the person that plays this instrument, the guiro. He is in sync totally with what Acerina is playing, and you'll hear somebody playing the clave, the beat that you first heard me play before, with my foot. Let's look at Acerina y su danzonera, playing the danzón the way it was originally played on the timpani. Now, remember, when you watch Acerina, he's left-handed. So everything that I did for you before, it's reversed. But check out also how he plays the side of the shell of the timbales, which is known as cáscara, C-A-S-C-A-R-A. It's also known as paila, P-A-I-L-A, and it's also the Spanish word for this instrument. So if you, I'm a young musician, and somebody in a salsa orchestra gives you an arrangement, the timbale part, and it says on the top, paila, it basically means the timbales, but it also means you're going to be playing the side of the shell. If it's cáscara, it means you're going to be playing the side of the shell. The instrument of itself, in and of itself, well, the two drums, you'll notice that this small drum is in front of me, and the large drum is to the left. The small drum is called macho, M-A-C-H-O, which means male. Female, hembra, H-E-M-B-R-A, is the large timbale, okay? The male talks a lot. But the female commands from African tradition. Okay, so let's look at Acerina, and the reason I pointed out to you that the small drum is in front, the large one to the left, because if you've studied classical percussion, any of you who have know that the French style of timpani playing, the small drum is to the front of the player, and all the larger drums are to the left. In the German style, it's the opposite. The large drum is here, and the smaller drums are to the left. So, hence, the French word for kettle drums, timbales, and the way the drums are set up in the French style of timpani playing, that is why we set up the drums the way they are. All right, once again, here's Acerina. back in time. Now, as I said before, the Cuban timbales replacing the timbal criollo and the timpani, well, they start appearing around 1899, 1900, with a gentleman by the name of Antonio Maria Romeo, a great pianist who develops the first charanga orchestra. What is a charanga? Again, it is flute, strings, bass, piano, guiro, and timbales. Antonio Maria Romeo developed this and championed the use of this smaller version of the timbal criollo or the European timpani, the timbales. The interesting thing about the timbales is that they are basically an African-inspired version of a European instrument. By that I mean that in terms of the European timpani, okay, you would see somebody playing like this. Okay? But when we play in the danzón, we are playing this instrument like if it was a hand drum. Let me give you an example. This is the basic pattern to accompany the danzón in the direction 2-3 of the clave. 2-3 means this: 2 notes first on the clave, then followed by 3 notes. Again, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So listen for the clave again. In fact, you could clap along, or play, if you have some clave sticks, you could play along. Now I'm going to do the most basic interpretation of the paqueteo for the danzón. What is the paqueteo? The mellowing out of the pattern that's used to accompany the danzón. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you notice I'm muffling the drum with my left hand. I have the stick underneath my palm and I'm holding it with my thumb. I put that on top of the drum. The stick goes up like this so it doesn't touch the drum. Then I play the rhythm with the stick in my right hand. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now some people like to play right in the center of the drum, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. You get a slightly higher pitch. Some people like to play a little bit farther back. But every time I hit the open sound, when I lift my hand out, I'm always in the middle of the drum. And some people like me play in between. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm muffling with my left hand. When I hit beat 4, I lift up my hand. I'll do it a little bit slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another technique that you can do is putting your forefinger on the top of the stick It's what we call palo muerto or dead sticking to get even a more quieter, more muffled, delicate sound. Now let's do the baqueteo starting on the 3 side of the clave, because sometimes the melody falls on that side of the clave. Okay, so you have to be able to do it in what we call reverse. All right, starting on the 3 side. It's really the same rhythm, except you're starting on the 3 side of the clave instead of the 2. So, for example, just to isolate this, the 2 side. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the 3 side. See how it locks in with the clave? Like a lock and key. Now let's do the whole pattern, but this time starting on the 3 side of the clave. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, it's very important that you know what the guiro plays, because the guiro is in lockstep with what the timbalero plays, or if it's a woman, timbalera. Okay? In the old days, this instrument, well, first of all, it's natural. It grows on a vine, hanging down. It's a gourd related to the calabash family. That's all it is. You cut file ridges into it, and in the old days, the artisans making this would just cut a square in the middle and hold it like this. Okay? But today most people make a receptacle to hold. Okay? So, notice what I play. I'm going to play in 2-3 clave. In 2-3 clave. It's the same rhythm that the timbala, that the timbala player or timbalero or timbalera would play. We use all down strokes. Very important. Put your forefinger on the stick. Why? Because if you hold the stick like this, the tendons contract. If you go like this, the tendon expands and it's relaxed. And later on, when we get into other styles of music that require fast tempos, it's going to help you later on. So if you could develop this basic guiro technique, you'll be in the groove. So let's do the basic guiro pattern for the danzón in 2-3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now in 3-2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if the danzón is very delicate and quiet, you can play like this. Hold the guiro transversely and just tap. In 3-2. In 2-3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 2, 3, 4. So you're doing the exact same thing that the person playing the timbales is doing. Okay, now, that's the most basic way to play the baqueteo of the danzón. Remember, put your thumb underneath your palm, holding the stick. Why are you doing that? Well, you're able to muffle the drum, and the stick is in your hand when you're going to do later on rellenos or repiques, fills. Okay? Another way to do it is like this. Just putting the stick, letting it rest right here. In 3, 2. Here we go. You have your hand flat, and then you lift up. But the most accepted ways to do what I just showed you, one of the advantages too is that, like as I said before, the stick is instantly in your hand to do fills. And when you're recording, you don't hear this. These little vibrations that sometimes happen when you're playing barehanded like that. Okay, now let's go on to the next step in terms of interpreting the baqueteo. Now we're going to do the baqueteo con relleno. Relleno means to fill in. So you're going to fill in with the tips of your finger in your left hand. So I'm going to slow it down a little bit more. Let me play for you in 3, 2 clave. First, straight, the most basic pattern, sin relleno, without filling in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, con relleno. In 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you really get to hear the Africanization of this instrument, because it sounds like somebody playing a hand drum, like a conga drum, with all of those rellenos filling in that I'm doing with the tips of my fingers of my left hand. Now, how do we do this? I'm going to slow this down even more. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm playing the same pattern in my right hand, and all of the empty spots I'm filling in, rellenando, with the tips of my fingers. So let's do the 2 side of the clave, limpio, clean, with no relleno. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was the whole pattern, just the 2 side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the 3 side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slower. two side. 2, 3, 4. Three side. 1, 2, 3, 4. The whole thing. Slower. Two. Starting on the two side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice how my hand, the butt of my hand, and my left hand remains on the drum until I release for the open tone. We got a nice cycle, dry sound. Almost like if you were playing a conga drum. Okay, now let me show you, okay, another technique that you can utilize with this. The same thing, except now you're using the rim of the drum. We'll do that in a second, and I'll show you how the guiro can also mimic these rellenos. All right, I hope you had a nice little break there, because I took a glass of water because it's hot today. Anyway, now, that technique of rellenando, filling in with the left hand, el baqueteo, B-A-Q-U-E-T-E-O, con, with, relleno, R-E-L-L-E-N-O, is very important for you to learn, okay? Again, remember, the stick is held by your thumb underneath your hand, okay? You release for the open tone on beat 4. All right, now I'm going to do it a little bit faster now. Okay, and the reason I'm going to do it a little bit faster is because in the 1920s, in the mid-1920s, a gentleman by the name of Aniceto Diaz, another great Cuban composer, started writing danzons with lyrics to them. Okay, and at a faster tempo. This became known as the danzonete. Okay? So, up until then, the danzones were all instrumental, all completely written out, right? And no improvisation was happening at all. All right? Every once in a while, Antonio Maria Romeo, the pianist, during his compositions, he would do what we call a little filigree on the piano. He was the pianist. Very important person to know. He's responsible for over 2,000 compositions. And he's part of the history of la música cubana. Okay? But no improvisation. occasionally the timbalero or timbalera, if it's a female, would do repiques, little fills, that we'll get into later on. But let me give you an example of a tempo for Aniceto Diaz's original composition, Danzonete, and I'll sing a little bit of it. It's in 2/3 clave. I'll be going to do the same baqueteo, but it's at a faster tempo. So I'm going to do the clave first so you hear where it is, and you can clap along or tap along. If you have a set of claves or sticks, you can tap the clave out with that. It's in 2/3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Danzonete. So that's a little bit of a fragment of Aniceto Diaz's Danzonete. Then other composers started writing pieces of music, but using the danzón style, but with lyrics. And Antonio Maria Romeo collaborated with a great Cuban singer, Barbarito Diaz, and he actually sang danzones with lyrics. You can find many of them on YouTube. So look up excuse me, Antonio Maria Romeo, Romeau, okay, and Barbarito Diaz, okay, Barbarito, all right, Barbarito, Diez, okay, all right. So now let's look at another technique for the danzón. Instead of me doing this, doing the rellenos with the tips of my fingers, if you're playing in a big band context where the band is more powerful and you're doing like a danzonete, or this rhythm can also be used to interpret a song, this rhythm. If the band leader tells you, hey, we're going to do a classic Cuban tune, Son de la Loma, but play the first half of the song, use the baqueteo of danzón, okay? So another technique that you could use in that kind of a context, instead of filling it with your fingers like this, is to strike the rim of the hembra, Hembra, the large drum, la hembra, the female, okay? So I'm going to do the same thing at a faster tempo, and I'll start off with the tips of my fingers, but then to give you contrast and so you can hear what it sounds like, switch to the rim. All right, let me do it slow first so you can, as we say in jazz, cop it, get it, and then I'll do it faster. All right, in 2/3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Using the rim. In 3, 2. The rim. Fast in 3, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. The rim. Now in 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. did a little repique there, fill, okay, as a timbalero would do in a live situation. Okay, so this rim in Spanish is known as aro, okay, the rim. You might see, if you have a chart, say in a more formalized band that has a maybe sophisticated arrangement, it might be very specific. It'll say baqueteo con el aro, which means do the baqueteo, but click with the left hand on the rim, okay? It's the same thing that I'm doing like this, except I'm using the rim. Okay, now to give you some inspiration real quick, you're probably wondering what's going on. Well, that was one of my cats, Clyde, that you've seen in previous videos. He just knocked something over, so don't worry about it. We'll continue in the spirit of things. This is live, no jive. So you're probably wondering, hey Bobby, I've seen salsa orchestras, but there's cowbells mounted here and this, that, and the other. That came later on in the evolution of the timbales in the 1930s. But one of the things that came along first in the 1930s was the use of this small little bell, as you see it mounted here. And we'll talk about that in the next percussion discussion when we get into part 2 of the basics of the danzón, and we're going to get into the cha-cha-cha and also how to play the bolero. But let me conclude by giving you 2 examples of repiques, fills that a timbale player would do in an improvisational context. When we're talking about the repiques, they're not solos, it's talking. Remember, we inherited all of this rhythmic vocabulary and redefined it into the music that we do today in various ways. And the main thing that we inherited is being able to speak, hablar en el tambor, no matter what context it is, whether it's the danzón from Cuba, whether it's the bombasica from Puerto Rico, whether it's the merengue from the Dominican Republic, etc., just to give you 3 examples of African rhythmic-based music that we do in the diaspora. Okay? So, the first repique I'm going to do for you is on the 2 sides of the clave. Okay? A basic repique on the 2 sides. Listen to how it sounds. I'm going to use the rim of the drum, and to get the sound, I hit between the last 1/3 of the stick to here. Okay? Clave wise, it'll sound like this in 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. Let's hear how it sounds in context with the paqueteo. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. Slow. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. So I didn't play anything there, so you can hear the 3 side of the clave all by itself. Now, the next one is on the 3 side of the clave. Okay? Here's what it sounds like in context. Starting in 3, starting in 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. did a little roll there. Un redoble, okay? The roll in drumming terms, if we use the vocabulary of the snare drum, is a 5-stroke roll. Slow. Okay. Right, left, right. And then fast. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. If you've never done rolls at all, ever, one thing you can do is take a pillow, take your sticks, and just practice this. Right, right, left, left. Right, right, left, left. Mama, daddy, mama. Let's do that. You can do that watching The Twilight Zone, Family Guy, whatever. Just keep doing that so that you develop the technique of doing what we call doubles, 2 in each hand. All right? So, let's hear this in context. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice there one time I did it with one hand. You can do it that way as well. Okay, now let's do it together with the relleno, or sorry, repique, the filling in of the 2 sides. Really slow. And what happens when you put them both together? You have una conversación, a conversation. The drum is talking. Okay? And 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. Again, back to the basic rhythm of the baqueteo. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that time, I added that 5-stroke roll, those 5 strokes, as another fill-in in there to adorn, ornament, okay? And this is what we do as timbaleros in this style of music. It's a very beautiful style. It's the first style that you must learn on the timbales to be a well-versed timbalero. And you know who was the master of it? The man who put the timbales and made it a solo instrument. The same thing that Gene Krupa did for the jazz drum set in jazz. Well, Tito Puente, native New Yorker, did the same thing for the timbales. And he learned how to play baqueteo from 2 Cubanos that lived in East Harlem, Spanish Harlem where he grew up, Carlos Montesino and Antonino Tony El Cojito Escoyes. How's that for some history? All right. My name is Bobby Sanabria, and you've been in tune with Percussion Discussion. I'm going to close off by doing a little bit of repicando on the timbales for just about 10-15 seconds so you can be inspired. Here we go in 2, 3 clave. 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4. See you on the next Percussion Discussion.